Hi, I'm James of an Armchair Warlord, and I'm here to discuss the classes section of the Pathfinder role-playing game. This is a continuation from our previous segment about the overall aspects of the Pathfinder game and the materials that you need to play it. Now we're going to get into the first step of character creation from our perspective, because choosing a class is choosing what type of character you want to play. It's choosing what you want your role to be in the game, which is more important to know from the beginning than figuring out whether you want to be an elf or a dwarf, or figuring out how high your strength, your charisma is, etc. Those are things that you're going to figure out and put into place based on what you want your role to be. So we'll go through the classes. The first one's the Barbarian. Barbarians are probably the best damage dealers in the game. They're also good at soaking damage. They're not quite as good at avoiding it as a fighter is, but once they do take hits, they can take a lot of them due to the fact that they have the highest hit die and therefore the highest hit point pool of any of the classes. One restriction on Barbarians is that because of their very chaotic nature, they can only play non-lawful alignments. So if you're thinking about a lawful good, lawful evil, or lawful neutral, you're going to have to choose another class. The key special ability that Barbarians have is their ability to go into a rage. This is just like a berserk state where they gain increased strength and constitution, allowing them to deal out more damage and take more damage before they get fatigued. Next class is the Bard. A Bard is a very utilitarian character. It's meant to be like a jack of all trades. He can cast some spells. He has a pretty good range of skills to choose from as far as class skills go. He has a big list of utility spells that he can choose from. He's not a good damage dealer, he's not a good damage taker, but he's very useful at causing confusion on a battlefield, or figuring out very hard to get through puzzles and dungeons. The bardic knowledge ability gives him an ability to instantly call up knowledge just from based on his supposed vast experience of travel and going around the world. His performances are his key thing. He's able to play an instrument or sing a song that adds like a constant buff or debuff to the entire party, or to the entire enemy party. Next we have your Cleric. Your Cleric is the best healer in the game. The Clerics are capable of repairing damage. Like at higher levels, they can instantly restore even the most critically injured character to full health. They can also go so far as to raise characters from the dead, which is extremely useful if your characters get into a lot of fights and take a lot of damage and pick a lot of fights that they're not necessarily equipped to win. They're also good at backup melee combat. They can wear heavy armor and wield a good weapon. They don't hit as hard as a fighter, and they don't have nearly as many combat feats, but they can still wade into a fight and deal out some damage. They have decent hit points as well, so that they can take hits. Their spells, unlike the previous Bard, their spells are based on divine power, and this is their ability to basically channel the essence and the power of their deity. When you're selecting a Cleric, it's key to select a Cleric that is the servant of the deity that's in style with the way you want to play. There's a huge list of deities to choose from, and if you go into any of the campaign settings, there's even bigger, more specialized lists. All these deities are going to give you domains, which give you permanent bonuses to your character, and then an array of domain spells, which is a pretty good bonus that allows you to cast an extra spell every day of each level from that domain. Also, Clerics are also good at channeling energy. They can channel either positive or negative energy. Positive energy will heal living things and harm undead things, whereas negative energy will have the opposite effect. You have to be careful early on in the game because channeling energy is not selective. You can take the feat to make it that way, but they do broadcast that energy to every creature around them. A smart Cleric will be able to do it in a very effective way. Later on in the game, as they level up, they get access to some extremely powerful offensive spells. They can call down columns of fire from the heavens and smite their enemies, all kinds of good stuff. They even get access to a spell called Miracle, which allows them to literally perform miraculous events using the power of their deity. Their other spells consist of lots of healing spells and regeneration type spells, and they also have a decent array of buffs and debuffs that they can use. Next class is the Druid. The Druid's kind of a backup healer. They can heal well, but not quite as well as a Cleric. They have access to basically the same array of healing spells, but one thing that the Cleric has over them is the Cleric can spontaneously change their spells out for healing spells, whereas Druids can spontaneously change their spells out for summoning spells. And this is really where a Druid can shine, is his ability to summon additional creatures to a battlefield to augment the abilities of his party. Also, Druids start out with an animal companion, which if they're choosing for combat, they can pick something like a bear or a tiger. They can be extremely effective in combat, especially early on in the game. They also have the ability to wild shape or transform themselves into bigger, stronger creatures, and at later stages they can even cast their spells while they're in these shapes. They get a lot of utility abilities that allow them to interact with nature. They can speak with plants. They can travel very well through difficult terrain. They also have access to a few buffs and debuffs that are extremely useful. And later on in the game, they get access to some of the same offensive spells that a Cleric does. So like calling down fire and causing huge storms of lightning and that type of thing. The only other thing about a Druid is they're restricted to neutral alignments, so you have to either play neutral good, true neutral, or neutral evil. The next class is the Fighter. The Fighter is your choice for frontline combat. His high hit points, his huge array of feats and combat feats, his ability to wear the heaviest of armors make him the best frontline melee combatant, and a very good ranged combatant as well if you kit him out right. They can absorb a lot of damage, they can deal a lot of damage. They don't have a huge selection of skills to choose from, but then again they don't really need them. That's not their role. Their role is to get in and win fights. The next class is the Monk. Monks are kind of like a backup combatant class. They're more about avoiding being hit and dealing out a lot of hits that don't necessarily do as much damage as being struck by a weapon, because they only use their fists. Monks can carry weapons, but they're not nearly as effective with that weapon as they are with their bare hands. Your monks are going to be dancing around a battlefield, striking people multiple times in a round, that type of thing. They're going to be creating a lot of confusion and drawing hits off, say, your weaker characters, or spreading out the damage that your barbarian or your fighter is going to have to be absorbing. They get a lot of resistances and immunities, especially later on in the game, that can make them extremely resilient. They become immune to disease, they become immune to poison, all types of things that just make them very hard to kill. Also, because they have the unique ability of being able to add their wisdom modifier to their armor class as well as their dexterity modifier, it makes them very hard to hit in melee as well. The only other restriction they have is that they can only be lawful, so you have to be lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil. They're considered very disciplined, very orderly characters. Your next class is your Paladin. Your Paladin is your Boy Scout. He's your typical do-gooder who's always looking to do the right thing. They can only be lawfully good aligned, so Paladins cannot harm innocent people, and to go even beyond that, they're not supposed to allow innocent people to be harmed in their presence, so they won't tolerate people around them committing acts of evil either. This can be a hindrance depending on the formation and the makeup of your party. So if you're going to play with a Paladin, then make sure that everybody in the party is cool with it, because it may create some tension later on depending on the kind of adventures your party gets into. Now, as far as the mechanics of the game go, they're excellent tanks. They wear heavy armor and carry shields, and they get some abilities that boost their ability to utilize that armor and those shields, so they can absorb a lot of damage, take a lot of hits. They have a limited selection of spells. These are typically a few healing spells and some minor buffs for themselves. Some of the more useful aspects of a paladin are their auras. They can put out several beneficial auras which make everyone in the party stronger and more resilient. They can also detect evil at will at all times, which is very good if you're about to be ambushed by a bunch of evil people. That paladin's going to know that they're there. They have a small selection of skills, but again, they're not really focused on skills. They're more about destroying evil and upholding good and defending the innocent. One of the things that that was added to the Paladin in Pathfinder over the traditional D20 system was the choice between a mount or an enhanced weapon. So once they reach a certain level, they get to choose whether they want to take on a special mount, which becomes more and more powerful as they level up, or modify their primary weapon, and it's typically going to be the weapon that their deity uses. So if they're worshipping a deity who uses a sword, then they're going to use a sword. They get some utility abilities as well, like Lay on Hands and Smite. Smite lets them deal out extra damage. Lay on Hands lets them heal themselves or others, which also gives them more staying power in a fight. And one other thing that Pathfinder added in, unique to the Paladin class, are mercies. Mercies are some things that they can use as they level up that will allow them to have some other beneficial effects on their party members. Also, as they level up, they can channel energy just like a cleric, not quite as well, but they can still do it. This can aid in healing your party members or inflicting damage on undead enemies. Next class is the Ranger. Your Ranger is your archetypal Ranger from Tolkien mythology. I mean, this is a combination of your Aragorn or Strider type character and your Legolas character. They're able to deal a lot of damage, but they don't necessarily want to be in the front line because they can't necessarily soak as much damage as a fighter. Depending on which combat style you choose, they're either going to be really good at ranged combat or they're going to be really good at melee, and that's usually from dual wielding swords or some other type of light weapon. They also get the added benefit of choosing favorite enemies and terrain, which give them combat bonuses when they're fighting their favorite enemies or fighting in their favorite terrain. They're excellent at tracking and hunting, and they get skills and class abilities and feat selections that amplify that ability to hunt down and destroy specific types of enemies. Next class is the Rogue. The Rogue is your stealth damage dealer and your infiltrator. He's your ambusher, your spy, your guy who's going to sneak in and assassinate people or run around causing confusion on a battlefield, sticking people in the back when they're not paying attention. Their sneak attack ability is really useful for that type of thing. If they can get a surprise hit in on someone, they can do some serious damage to them, even from very early stages in the game. Also, they make excellent dungeoneers due to the vast array of skills that they have access to. Their class skill list is longer than any other class in the game. So rogues typically benefit from a high intelligence because you're going to want to give them a high score so you can maximize the array of skills that they have access to. They're also the only classes that really excel at doing things like picking locks, cutting purses, and disabling traps. Also, one of the new things that Pathfinder added to the rogue class was their talents. These are specialized things that you can add to the character as you level up. They give them some unique abilities or give them some resistances or some bonuses in combat, depending on which ones you choose. The next class is the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer is a very specialized form of arcane caster. They have a very limited number of spells that they can cast, but they can cast them much more frequently than a wizard. So if you specialize in something like evocation, whereas a wizard can probably throw out more powerful fireballs, a sorcerer is going to throw those fireballs out more often in a day. He's going to be able to use his spells longer. They have low hit points, so you got to be careful when you're building the character. Make sure that you give them either make up for it with high constitution or give them high dexterity and make sure that they can avoid being hit. Another thing that Pathfinder added to the sorcerer class to give us some more spice was the bloodlines. So when you're creating a character, you choose a specific bloodline, which gives your character some unique things to add, and also some unique bonuses and some additional spells to select. And the last class is the Wizard. Wizards are extremely useful in the game as either specialized spellcasters or as a universal arcane problem solver. Basically, wizards can know an unlimited number of spells, which means that any ability that you could think of to use magic to do, a wizard can figure out how to do it. They have very small skill selection. They don't really rely on that, though. They're going to rely on their spells, because anything that they can't figure out how to do naturally, they're going to figure out some supernatural way to do it using their magic. They get access to all the knowledge skills, which is very useful because they're usually going to have high intelligence scores because that's their key spellcasting attribute. So they're going to know a lot, and they're going to be able to use that knowledge to benefit their party, especially in dungeoneering situations where you're trying to figure out puzzles or find obscure information. One thing that was different about the Pathfinder Wizard over the traditional D20 Wizard is their ability to choose an arcane bond rather than being stuck with an arcane familiar. A lot of players didn't necessarily like having the additional burden of managing their familiar stats, so Pathfinder made it to where you could choose to have an arcane bond instead, which is just something simple like a piece of jewelry or an item that the wizard carries around that focuses his magic. Also, wizards get access to a few bonus feats that are in the meta magic realm. They can either choose feats that enhance their spellcasting ability, or they give them access to the ability to create magical items. So your wizard's really your choice for having a vast arcane knowledge or having an ability to cast a wide array of spells.